Well, now it is time for the Cloud Data Protection panel discussion on the topic Cloud Security and Data Protection. We're talking about ease data complexity, providing a central access point, bringing greater data visibility, security techniques from both software and hardware aspects, general privacy challenges and GDPR specific challenges, cloud compliance with intelligence context-aware AI. Also looking at enforcing segmentation and threat controls for workloads in IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS environments. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got our panelists, Antonius Ruslan, Information Security AIA Singapore, where Antonius is a seasoned IT security professional who has 15 years of experience in the area of IT security, IT infrastructure, IT audit, and IT consultancy. He has been working in Indonesia and Singapore. His main area of focus recently is cloud security and cybersecurity. We also have Benedict Sulaiman, Senior VP, Head of IT Project, Management Division, PT Bank, KEB, Hana, Indonesia. Benedict, with over 20 years of experience in multinational and international company with various business sectors, a Microsoft certified system engineer with vast experience in ICT operation planning, hardware, network infrastructure, and project management. A member of the Indonesian Chambers of Commerce as well. We have Hilal Ahmad Loan, Head of Information Security, Traveloka. Hilal is the CISO of Southeast Asia's largest travel and lifestyle company, Traveloka. Hilal graduated as genetics major, but was seduced by information security and never looked back. Hilal holds Master of Science from University of Wales and MBA from IFIM Bangalore. A veteran in information security, he began his career as email security expert, and in the next 14 plus years, he has become a developer, an architect, application security expert. Hilal considers himself a student of InfoSec, where every day is a new learning opportunity for him. This entire panel discussion is going to be moderated by Joshua AU, Head Data Center A-Star Agency. Well, Joshua held many functions throughout his career, ranging from system architect, technical project manager, trainer, and operation manager. Joshua launched and maintained offshore projects for mobile carriers in the Asia-Pacific region and currently involved in delivering a resilient and secure hosting environment for the scientific community and the leader of the IMASN's Singapore chapter. So ladies and gentlemen, with this, I present to you our panel for today. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us. Over to you, Joshua.
Thank you for the great introduction. Now, just to set some things in context, according to a recent article, spending on a public cloud is growing on a compound annual rate of 25% across Asia Pacific, faster than the US and faster than Western Europe. So cloud budgets now account for around 5% on average, and is likely to double to 10% of an enterprise IT budget by 2023. But without a cohesive cloud operating model, it becomes harder for companies to integrate their cloud capabilities into its core businesses and to deliver sustainable outcomes. So today, we want to look at how our panelists are able to overcome their various challenges in the area of cloud security and data protection for their cloud journey. So my first question to the panelists is that we have heard about the benefits of going to the cloud and also the potential regulatory costs. And I believe that Indonesia in particular has its own data localization regulations. In every country, this is necessary to ensure the interests of the government, to ensure the interests of the citizens as well. I think for audiences who are not in Indonesia, just a brief recap. We are talking about regulations such as Regulation number 20 of 2016 regarding protection of personal data in electronic systems. We're referring to regulations such as the Government Regulation number 82 of 2012 on electronic systems and transactions, or even Law number 11 of 2008 on electronic transactions and information, which I think we often refer to as the EIT law. So these are the regulations that organizations in Indonesia need to consider when they put their compute from on-premise to the cloud. So we'd like to hear from each of the panelists how they've been able to have the assurance that they are able to meet these various regulatory requirements for putting their data to the cloud, make sure that they fulfill all the data localization requirements. So maybe if we can start to hear from Benedict on this.
Thank you for the opportunity, also for the brief introduction earlier by Hana. So from me, myself, actually, it is a huge challenge, especially in the banking industry, for reaching up to the cloud. In terms of data privacy and data security, that has always been the issue. Even in Indonesia, just like you mentioned earlier, Josh, there are very much regulation that really prohibits companies to use clouds efficiently. So for banking industry in Indonesia, actually, we are still relying a lot on premise environment. But starting as of, I think, the past 2 years, we are starting to move to the cloud more frequently. Why? Because the trend is already changing like that. And actually, one of the most push from the condition itself is even from the pandemic that is happening right now. Because if we are relying a lot in terms of the cloud, the speed of implementation, which is actually the time to market, that's the key actually that actually creates the more opportunity for us. In terms of the security itself, we got plenty of supporting partnership with lots of IT companies that can provide huge opportunity in terms of securing the application or even securing the network itself. So in terms of security, it's okay, in my opinion. But for certain companies, not all companies, of course, it will still be a challenge because the investment in the long run is going to take the hit. So for certain companies like large or medium banks who has maybe good investment planning, I don't think it's going to be an issue. But for a small bank or just like newly appointed bank, it's going to be a hassle. But we can see a major breakthroughs also in startups company, especially for the financial institution companies. They are able to overcome those regulations because they are not being well covered in terms of the regulation itself by the government. So we can see plenty of peer-to-peer lenders company, even though they are already licensed by the OJK, by the Indonesian regulation, they mostly are using cloud because they are not bound by certain regulations. Now, as for banks, we are bound to keep the data within our own premise, which is actually still the downside of our own regulations. But as of this year, the POJK 20, which was launched maybe a few months back, is already allowing us to put into the cloud or even external data center, which actually create us more opportunity to use cloud providers like AWS or even Oracle or even Azure, making it more simple for us to reaching our customers. So I think that is one of the huge challenges going forward, but we are heading to the right track, heading to the clouds, but may not be going to be for all. So I think that's for the start.
I think from your clarification, we understand that the compliance landscape is not as straightforward. I think any diligent enterprise can take the time to understand what is being stated in OJK, what is being stated by Cominfo and the various regulations.
Yes.
If we could hear from Hilal, maybe your answers to the same question.
Thank you very much, Joshua, and thank you, Bhavana, for that kind introduction earlier. So I obviously have a lot of similarities with Mr. Benedict, right? So although like our verticals are totally different. So the organization I come from, Traveloka, had the advantage of basically starting cloud native because we were a startup, as Mr. Benedict pointed out, that we had the luxury of starting with cloud. We had absolutely no on-premises infrastructure. But as you know, like each industry when it starts has a lot of challenges when it actually has to maintain going to the market pace. You have to basically like go to get the application to the market first. And that introduces a lot of complexities in terms of like making sure that we map the security controls, the compliance controls, and the regulatory requirements. And a lot of over the time, what we experienced was that there are certain areas which are kind of hazy in terms of applying compliance and regulatory mechanisms. And there is no straightforward path to compliance, particularly in Indonesian context. And there are certain standards like the data protection standard, the privacy standards, and things like that, which obviously have not been fleshed out entirely, right? So they're still in process. Some of them are still in draft status. Some of them are still actually getting adopted in the industry, particularly like for us who have like massive amounts of data that actually goes to the cloud. And we have massive transactions happening on our platform. That actually points to us having to basically do like a catch-up sort of game, right? So we define our own standards sometimes, which obviously in long run do not matter to the government. So the challenge before us is basically for the government and us to work together to basically bring these standards out, which will be beneficial for the government to basically implement and enforce, as well as for us to follow as well. Recent basically like standards that have come into play and the regulatory requirements that have come into play, including the data privacy requirements, which have been actually like modeled after the Singapore Data Privacy Act, and it has also been modeled after the GDPR. So when you actually like take those comparisons and you want to implement all of those controls, it's really not like a apple to apple comparison, right? You cannot do that. So obviously a lot of customization has been done, which sort of like brings a lot of challenge in actually in us to basically be compliant with those standards. And on top of that, we obviously are expanding into fintech area, which is kind of like a financial area, which is like alien early concept earlier in Indonesia. So that actually brings a fresh challenge in terms of us actually getting compliant with the OJK, like Benedict was mentioning earlier. So it actually brings those challenges as well. So we are playing a catch-up game. So fortunately, like some of the things like data privacy requirements and data protection requirements, we started basically mapping ourselves to the strictest possible regulator requirement, and that would actually make us basically compliant with the rest of them as well. So internally, we developed a Traveloka data privacy and policy framework, which included all the requirements and regulations that where we operate. Traveloka operates in all of Southeast Asia, so different places, different regulations, and different data privacy requirements. So obviously, like we actually developed in-house, basically like a privacy framework, which actually took care of the regulations and compliance. And obviously, like because we are like some regulations that are like mandatory for us to have, like including the PCI, ISO compliance, and things like that, which we do on an annual basis. And those actually help us in actually defining those security controls and standards that we need to implement. So the biggest challenge I see is basically us and the government working together to basically like come to a common platform where we can define the standards and the controls required for the government to enforce it and for us to basically comply with it. Thank you.
It sounds to me that it's a journey, and it's a journey where you need to do a lot of consultation, talk to policymakers, talk to maybe competitors and friends in industry, as well as those in the supply chain. So as things are clearer, it's a lot easier for you. But sounds to me perhaps your journey is a little easier because you started on the cloud, so you probably avoided some of the pain of lifting and refactoring from on-premise moving to the cloud. So I think that's makes things a little easier for your enterprise architect. I think let's pose a question to Park Antonius, and I think because Park Antonius, your company is in other places, so a lot of cross-border issues will come into play. So it'd be great to hear your thoughts as well.
Yep. Thanks, Joshua. So I would like to share a bit more from the Singapore perspective, where basically we have a couple of key cloud requirements when we are going to outsource our operation to the cloud service provider, it falls under the scope of MS outsourcing guidelines, where basically the organization must make sure that proper governance, risk management, and internal controls of the cloud service provider have been assessed. And it mainly pertaining to the risk of data access, confidentiality, integrity, and regulatory compliance and auditing. So before the engagement with the cloud service providers, the organization must make sure that those factors have been assessed and it's aligned with the organization policy. And on top of this, it also says that the ultimate responsibility and accountability of the cloud usage is still the organization. Hence, the organization must make sure that they manage the oversight of the cloud service providers to continuously assess the respective risks when they are doing the operation with the cloud service providers. And that due diligence must cover the service provider experiences, security and internal controls, PCM, as well as its ability to comply with the required laws and regulations. Secondly, we also have ABS Cloud Computing Guideline here as additional reference, where basically it says that DFI should establish a proper risk management framework and conduct appropriate due diligence to the cloud service providers. Some of the key areas being mentioned here is related to identity and access management, application security, disaster recovery, SLA, data retention, and all those key items. And besides these two regulations, we also have another regulation, which is not specific to cloud, but it's a bit more general, which is the Personal Data Protection Act, where basically it governs the collection, usage, and disclosure of any personal data. So regardless of you have on-prem environment or cloud environment, this is also a very crucial aspect for the organization to make sure that we safeguard all the personal data and protect the data from unauthorized access or usage. That's all, Joshua. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. I think whether you're hosted in, for example, it can be Cambodia, can be Indonesia, can be Philippines. Every country has its own unique set of regulations. And as you cross from one border to another border, now you have to be aware of both regulations. So it clearly is not an easy task. I have another 3 questions. I think to make it easier, I will just ask one question at a time so that each of you can give some brief answers to one question at a time. So my next question to all of you is, what are your challenges to secure your data in the cloud and to fulfill these regulatory requirements? So earlier we spoke about what are the data requirements. I think for you to have a plan to do so, maybe you have a strategy, maybe you have an adoption plan. So we'd love to hear what are your challenges and what is your plan to move to the cloud while making sure that you achieve these data requirements. So I would suggest maybe if I could hear from Benedict first, and then we'll move on to Hilal, and then to Antonius. So Benedict, if we could hear from you.
Okay, from me first then in that case. So what we've done in the past, even in my previous company, when we are trying to move to the cloud, we started slow with the most, I would say, not the priority servers or not the priority systems first. Yeah. So for the core system, we put it aside first, and we started with just more supporting surrounding application first. So for instance, like for the reporting, yeah, reporting informations, and then the front end part of the system, that's the one that we are trying to move first, even on the development side. So some of our development servers are actually located in the clouds. Yeah. So for us, it's not a major issue, because we are considering the data that was stored in it is mostly the dummy data. It's not the right customer's data. So it's not an issue for us. But in that case also, we are doing the assessment on the risk itself and the security assessment whenever we are deploying a new cloud service. So we're ensuring and we're trying whether we cannot be penetrated by other people as well. So a routine check in terms of the penetration test should also be conducted on a regular basis, yeah, which for us as a bank, we are deemed to do so every year. Uh, when we are doing that, of course, there will be some reports. Mostly are attempts. We cannot do anything about attempts, right? As long as it is not going past through of our security. So we gladly say that up to this moment, we don't have any incident. Yeah. So based on that one, we could say that slowly, maybe in the next few years, we can say that even we could decide whether we can put the core into the cloud as well. But the thing is, the regulation, again, just like what Hilal mentioned, the regulation for us as a banking, I mean, it is not allowed to put everything into the cloud. Even the new regulation itself doesn't state that. Yeah, it's very vague. Maybe if I can say that something that is not written over there could be deemed as allowed or not allowed. So for any activities that we would like to do, we have to ask for approval to the regulatory. Yeah, whether it is the Ministry of Information or even to the financial regulators as well.
Okay. I think I understand it's a complex journey for you.
Yeah,
if,
of course.
if you could hear from Park Hilal as well.
Yeah, so everything that Park Benedict just said is applicable no matter whether you're a financial institution or not. So I think some of the things that I believe are extremely important and that helps us in actually getting the control of our data security is basically like something very fundamental, right? So we start with basically data discovery and our visibility. Where exactly is the data? How do we actually like discover where it is? And then obviously like we follow that with the data classification and implementing the data controls necessary to basically control that data. So access control obviously becomes incredibly important, and you need to have like a really good way to determine basically there is no access group and things like that, and who needs to access to the data and how that data is actually used is actually extremely important. So in terms of like the data protection strategy, I think it's incredibly important that we have both the operational excellence that Park Benedict just mentioned, including vulnerability assessment, penetration testing, external and internal application code reviews and things like that. They actually are really important in terms of securing the data. But apart from that, I think the other operational initiatives like change management and basically like simple data controls like encryption and basically access control are equally important, if not more important. So a combination of technical controls and operational controls actually make up the bulk of our strategy to basically protect the data. And apart from that, because we operate into multiple different clouds, which is like we have a Google cloud as well, we have the AWS cloud as well. So in order for us to basically maintain a consistent data control policy, it's very difficult if we have like multiple layers of security, but no way to implement that. So we obviously, like I said at the beginning, so it's important that we actually keep an eye on the fundamentals, basically make sure that we have both the technical excellence as well as operational excellence in place. So, and that actually gives us a 360-degree view of our data protection and control strategy. And that works really well because it does not leave anything to imagination, or it doesn't leave anything to basically guessing, right? So it is like a proper procedural and properly document strategy that actually works for us, at least in terms of our data protection strategy.
it sounds to me that even though everyone's journey is a little different, everyone faces slightly different circumstances, but the hygiene factors are the same. Change management, password management, patch management, all of these are fundamentals, these are hygiene. Of course, beyond the hygiene, everyone's strategy may be a little different. If we could hear from Park Antonius about your response to this question as well.
Yep, thanks, Joshua. So basically, I would agree with what Pak Hilal and Pak Benedict mentioned just now. It's also relevant for me, but probably I would not say that it's a challenge, but it's more on the key items that we should take into the consideration when we try to put our data in the cloud. There are 4 factors that I can see here. First is the organization must make sure that whatever cloud service that they will use is aligned with the organization policy. So let's say the encryption requirement in the organization says that it must follow a certain requirement, then that requirement must be also covered by the cloud service providers. Second thing is also the alignment of the operating model once the organization is moving to the cloud. It could be from the support perspective, security operation centers, how we access the data, how we secure the environment. Basically, those alignment between the on-prem and cloud must be taken into the consideration. Third item is from the financial standpoint. As we know that cloud will provide you with more mobility, agility, flexibility. So the benefit of moving to the cloud should exceed the cost. And from the financial point of view, the investment must be worth it. Fourth item is more on the human side, where all the staff must be eager to continuously learn all the technology, all the new features, because some of the features announced by the cloud service provider can be very fast. So those kind of mentality and hunger for the continuous learning must be within all the staff in the organization. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Antonius. I think you made a very good point that that there might be a difference in the way things are being done and should be done. I believe that as we move from on-premise to the cloud, things will have to change. But to what extent do we change? Do we change the way things are done in the boardroom? The conversations may have changed. Do we change the way we run our business? And more importantly, do we change the way we run our IT teams? Because what used to work on-premise may no longer work once we move to the cloud. It may be new skills, new challenges, new things to learn, like your CASBs, your jump holes, new policies to make. So I'm going to hear from each of you. What are the changes that you have seen for your organization so that you are more ready for the cloud journey? It can be the boardroom, it can be your business, and it can be your IT. So if we could hear from Park Benedict first.
Okay, thank you so much. So actually, on this matter, I mean, as we know, cloud has been for quite some time actually. It's already been shifted actually in the part of the IT resources. We can say that we don't have that many IT resources to manage the data center and also to manage the network infrastructure on a daily basis on premise anymore, right? Those sort of resources we could outsource to the cloud providers or any managed services provider. Yeah. So if we have to keep several of them, maybe in terms of planning or more on a specialist level, not on a day-to-day level. I used to work in a data center where We work in shift and works 24/7. Right? And nowadays, I don't think that many companies could afford to have those resources like that to maintain and just checking the server day by day, checking the aircon day by day. No. But with the help of the cloud, actually, we can do that now, right? We could save the amount of expenses that we used to spend to manage our data center and replace it with our investment into the cloud itself. Those are the most ones. But in the long run, right? We could save more people actually not to work at the same place. So we could distribute them in several locations without having the necessity to come to the office. This pandemic actually showing us how to do actually distributed work. Yeah, it creates us the opportunity to learn and uh, to change the model of our working environment in the next 1 year or 2 years to come. So I think we could start from that one.
I think what strikes me is that there are tremendous benefits of moving to the cloud. It could be scalability, it could be agility, it could be security. But
Oh,
we're changing one
definitely.
of our problems.
Definitely, of course. I mean, scalability, nowadays, we don't need to prepare like, okay, let's prepare 3 years or 5 years of plan, right, in terms of sizing. I mean, if we have to purchase server or storage from the very beginning, then it will be a huge investment from the beginning, right?
Yeah.
IT is not only IT, but also we have to consider the finances, right? In terms of investment, TCO, our finance will definitely going to say that, right? Total cost of ownership, right? You have to consider that one by one every month. Okay, this is the expenses, whether this is going to hit our profit and loss, right? P&L, definitely. But I mean, if we use to the cloud, we can do the operation. We can still do the businesses with the low cost, right? And along the way, gradually add up. Of course, along the business itself. If the business is progressing well, that means we have to implement more spaces. For instance, we have to scale it up. We have to speed it up, right? Means we can spend more. But if we already start from the beginning, wow, it's a huge investment from the beginning, right? You have to implement your security devices, you have to implement your server, you have to implement your storages. Not to mention, you have to implement, you have to have the deployment team, right?
Okay. True. I think let's hear from Park Hilal. Are your experiences similar in terms of how you run your business, maybe your boardroom, maybe your business, but most importantly, your IT? Has your IT changed in order to match these challenges?
Yeah, I think we are a bit different from Benedict's basically organization, and the way they work is because we were a startup, they were not. And we were an e-commerce basically like a business, and they're a banking business, financial institution. So our challenges are totally like, obviously like there are similarities, but it's kind of like difficult to compare the two. Our experience has been, I think, a bit better in terms of like our support from the executives, the support from the engineering, the support from top to bottom, basically our operations. So everything has been pretty solid in terms of collaboration and things like that. So what exactly has changed, or what has basically like amplified in the recent time, is basically like the newness of it all. Not exactly the newness of it all, but I think Park Antonius actually said earlier that cloud providers actually like roll out services and features at such a rapid pace. It's very difficult to basically keep up. So which actually leads to basically like increased attack surface area of like you have so much gaps in your environment. It's very difficult to basically have control over all of them at the same time. Apart from that, obviously the threat landscape has changed completely different. Earlier, you could have like a data center and you isolate it, you do controls that you can implement. Now it has actually a single click can actually like make your entire organization vulnerable. So obviously there are a lot of challenges which actually keep us always on our toes to basically get those things in basically like in order for us to basically be able to use cloud data centers. And obviously, like I said earlier, also that because of the hybrid cloud based mechanism, and not exactly hybrid cloud, but multi-cloud environment is actually like also a bit of a challenge in terms of implementing the data security controls and things like that. But what is good is actually like how Antonius earlier said, that it's very easy for us to spin out or basically roll out changes or patches or any kind of insecure mechanism which will help us in actually becoming more secure. What I feel interesting is, interesting cloud environments is that not much has changed from the earlier problem that we had with on-premise infrastructure as well. We still need to basically maintain the identity and access management has to be like proper, right? The technical controls have to be proper. But if you look at the way identity and access management has been implemented by Amazon or by Google, right? So it's way different. And to basically just understand that and basically to keep a handle on all of those accounts and handle up all those access permissions and privileges, it's really difficult to basically like make everybody to basically like be on the same page with regards to security profiles. So the challenges and basically we have and the experience that we have on the cloud side is not exactly towards basically like having a data center on cloud, which is challenging. It's not. But what is challenging is basically like making sure that all of them have basic security controls and basic security mechanism that allow us to run them with the kind of security baseline that we intended to use, and that actually makes us compliant and basically does not have any regulatory violations. So that's actually very important and very challenging as well.
So maybe just an add-on question to that. I
Sure.
think like the other panelists where there is an institutional background, you may have servers that have been running for maybe 10 years, 15 years, or in legacy services. I think as a startup, you are the most nimble, and perhaps you need to respond in a very quick manner when things change. So in your case, for you to start your cloud journey, has it been something that took weeks, months, or just for the benefit of audience,
It is.
how long did that journey take for you?
Yeah, it's always evolving, right? So even though we may have spun out the basic features at a particular time, it may not have taken a lot of time for us to do that. But what happens is that every time we think that, okay, we are done with basically the infrastructure changes, it doesn't, right? So we always have new changes that are coming up. Sometimes people like say they don't like Glaciers for data backups or data archives. They want to go to something else, which Google offers for that matter. So it's always basically a challenge actually keeping up the pace with the kind of features that the cloud basically release, right? And that's also true for all the security controls that we actually need. So they keep on rolling out these new features and keep rolling out basically like the new products that we may or may not want to use. So it's always kind of like an evolving, or it's like a kind of like a journey. It's never ending, to be honest. For us to respond to a particular basically change in the environment is obviously like easier for us because all of our infrastructure is cloud native. So we don't have to struggle with basically making changes or making something to basically like respond faster or maybe like, for example, like the incident response process itself. It's very, very nimble in our case because everything is on the cloud. We can literally, by the push of a button, actually stop everything or start everything. So obviously, like there are like the other actual advantage I believe is, and which is sort of like comes as default with most of the cloud providers, is the ability to basically have business continuity and basically have like default failovers. So I like that I like that very much because although it does basically helps us actually roll those features very fast and does not take a lot of time. So which I think is a really, really huge advantage in terms of if we want to basically like move to cloud. For us, it's actually like easier because we were cloud native to start. For banks and other people, they are different. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Thanks. Yes.
It seems that I think all the panelists are very enthusiastic. I'm also very enthusiastic. And this is a subject that I think probably would take half a day if we were to go in depth. I wish we had more time. So Hin, perhaps you guys need to come back next year when we have round 2. Now, I think it's good to have just a one sentence takeaway from each of the panelists so that I think for the audience, you can bring this back, think about it. Is there something I can do to get my own journey started? So why don't we hear first from Antonius? Maybe just a short one sentence takeaway for the audience.
Sure. I think the discussion has been very interesting so far. And yeah, generally, cloud offers business with many benefits. That's why the adoption of cloud, either public or private, have significantly increased within the last couple of years. Some of the advantages, as we've been discussing, is about the cost efficiency, scalability, mobility, as well as from the operational point of view, where you have an automatic software update, inbuilt security controls, inbuilt features, and all those stuffs.
Okay.
And that's why also the increasing number of tech-savvy business and industry leaders are recognizing the many benefits of the cloud technology. I think what is very important here for us as a key takeaway is aligning the cloud technology with the objective of the organization, as well as aligning the cloud requirements with our organization policy to make sure that whatever cloud adoption that we would have will provide value added to the organization. Thanks, Joshua.
Pak Hilal, if you could give us a one sentence just to wrap up what you want to share with the audience.
Yeah, I think basically, if you are in the process of moving to cloud, or you have, or basically like interest in moving to cloud, I think you should never ever ignore the data governance and data privacy requirements. Start with that, and everything everything will follow.
Okay, noted on that. I think we'll wrap up with Pak Benedict's maybe one sentence takeaway.
Yeah, okay. So I think to summarize, I think one thing that we need to accept that cloud is already here, right? And it will change a lot of perspective in the mindset of IT, especially in the older IT mindset. But it will create us more benefits in terms of the financial sector, yeah. Especially on how we could manage the expenses, right, in the long run, expecting the time to market as well, and then more on the benefits for the survivability of the company itself.
Okay, all right. Pak, thank you for your kind guidance. I think let's pass the time back to the host. Thank you again for giving us the opportunity to share the audience.
Thank you so much, Joshua, Hilal, Antonius, Benedict. What an incredible panel this has been. Once again, a big thank you for joining us.